Everybody in Hollywood knows who we are, but nobody on LinkedIn does.
I made a deal that for 5 years I wouldn't take any time off. I worked 365 days a year.
I've been representing very famous people since I was in my 20s.
I've worked on 85 major motion pictures and television shows.
Jack Nicholson,
Brad Pitt is in it, Harrison Ford,
Sean Penn, Gary Oldman, and Harrison, Bono and Sting and Springsteen and The Edge and Peter Gabriel and Tracy Chapman and Michael Jackson.
Paul Mazursky said to me, I want to use this camera. I need to have you to do this because you're going to jog and run right with these people. These cameras basically revolutionized the film industry. You could hand hold it. It could be in a studio mode. It changed filmmaking in New York and probably all over the world.
We helped bring the right talents, the right director, the right producer.
What the best financial model was and how we were going to make our money back. I'm kind of like a pit bull, so I got him like $18 million back.
Changed the industry.
Hi everyone, I'm Maria Mollen and you're listening to the Now We Know podcast. Today we are diving into the fascinating world of film financing, production, and behind-the-scenes strategies that bring stories to life and make them profitable. We have an incredible lineup of guests with us, a powerhouse team of industry veterans who've been behind some of the most iconic films, TV shows, and live events in history. From working with Michael Jackson and managing world champion boxers to collaborating with legendary filmmakers and helping new projects get financed and distribute, they've done it all. And they're here today to pull back the curtain on how the business really works, what creators need to know, and what makes a project get that elusive green light. Now, before I introduce everyone, let me tell you a bit about Group 2 Entertainment, the company at the center of it all. G2E is a top-tier entertainment consulting firm specializing in film and TV financing. They focus on accessing fully developed film, animation, and TV projects, matching them with strategic funding partners and guiding clients through production and distribution opportunities. With a portfolio that includes over $2.5 billion in film content and 15 TV series, G2E brings a powerful combination of financial expertise and creative oversight, helping both established and emerging filmmakers navigate the complex world of financing and distribution. Their mission is simple but ambitious: finding quality content and helping bring it to market with financial viability and creative excellence at the core. Today with us, we have the powerhouse behind Group 2 Entertainment, the leadership team driving both the creative and financial sides of the business. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. And now let's start by welcoming Richard Hone, CEO of Group 2 Entertainment. Richard is a veteran in the entertainment and sports industry with over 40 years of experience spanning film, television, music management, and sports deals. His impressive track record includes negotiating some of the most complex contracts in the business. Over the years, Richard has represented some of the biggest names in entertainment, including Michael Jackson, who he represented for over a decade, overseeing deals related to the Beatles catalog and MyJack royalties and so much more. He was also behind the scenes of legendary live events like the Mandela Freedom Concert and Pink Floyd The Wall at the Wall. Today, he brings this unmatched experience to G2E, acting as the bridge between filmmakers and investors, ensuring projects are financially structured and positioned for success. Richard, it's an honor to have you here with us. Welcome to the show. And I'd love for you to start by telling us a bit more about your amazing life and amazing background.
Well, I think it really is not really amazing. I think I just have a really substantial work ethic. I work massive hours. I answer every email I get. I am very, very diligent in detail, attention to detail. I learned very important lessons about time management very early on and how important and critical that is to operating and growing successful businesses. I've been involved and sourced through more than 40,000 deals over the years. So we have a very good understanding of, initially it's very simple for us to see what works, what doesn't work, what we think is viable without having to spend, an unnecessary time to go through that. I think I've been pretty successful at taking these ethos and working with Katya and Christy on that. I rely on many other people because you'll always hear me say I always stay in my lane. There's a couple things I do well that I know well, and I try not to get outside of that. And that's why Craig is here. Craig is a legendary director of photography and cinematographer. He's done some of the biggest movies in the history of the movie business, and he ensures our production values and make sure that when we deliver films, we're delivering films at a budget range with the production values to have successful theatrical runs. Kyle is a line producer and a unit production manager. So Kyle and I focus on budgets based on the script and the genre. We create budgets that we believe are lean. So when Craig sees them, he knows that we're running a production in a way that makes sense, where we don't have too many shooting days. Kyle has spent a lot of time with me understanding our finance models and how we rely on A-list talent. And Christy and Katya are the ones who kind of start everything. When the packages come in, they assess them for the creative side. I've sourced well over 7,000 film packages and have never read a script. I'm not a creative guy, so I work with them. We also have a parent company that has a bigger group of partners, and together our parent company's partners have produced, financed, and sold over 300 films. One of them is one of the most influential people in the movie business in the last 30 years. Our partners in London have made 200 films and focus on mainly animated films and our X Factor in the Jungle. So we have a big presence in family animated. We have a lot of wind here. My screen door seems to be blowing off. And that's really my focus is working with the institutional capital providers. I've been very successful in raising capital through investment banks and hedge funds, private equity firms, and family offices. And we create models and finance structures for investors that mitigate risk lower than anybody we believe in the movie business right now. And then everybody else has their very strategic role in seeing that process through. And that's, in a nutshell, what I do.
Thanks, Richard. It's a pleasure to meet you and to hear all of that stories. Now, next, I'm excited to introduce also Craig DiBona, an award-winning director of photography, cinematographer and director, and a true veteran of the motion picture industry. With over 40 years of experience, he started his journey in Boston, studying mass communication and speech at Emerson College, while simultaneously working as a news stringer for the major networks. From building cutting-edge camera equipment at General Camera Corporation and Panavision to becoming the first to use Panavision's Panaglide stabilizer on major productions, Craig has been at the forefront of visual innovation. His incredible body of work includes iconic films like The Godfather Part III, Die Hard with a Vengeance, Carlito's Way, A Bronx Tale, and You've Got Mail, and he's collaborated with some of the most celebrated directors in the business, including Francis Ford Coppola, Pakula, John Huston, Nora Ephron, and many more. Craig's career has been defined by delivering visual storytelling at the highest level, bringing directors' visions to life on the screen time and time again. Craig, welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure to have you here, and I really love to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. The industry's changed a lot in the last 50 years. When I started, believe it or not, I was actually building newsreel cameras and fixing them at General Camera. And as time goes on, you start to realize that, you can make innovations to make things better, easier. In fact, the first camera I worked on was a 16 millimeter camera because in the old days, you had a 400-foot load. But if you're doing a newscast of a person making a speech, at a certain point, you're going to run out of film. and then you'd have to rethread the whole camera and everything else and lose a lot of what they were saying. So I came up with the first camera that basically had you'd load a 400-foot cassette, and you could just open the door, stick the thing in, put it right through the gate, and you were ready to go again. And that started in the early 70s. And of course, right after that, it became electronic news. So it went to video cameras. And working for Panavision, we, in the early 70s, we made the Panaflex camera. We used to, we're manufacturing them in Tarzana, California. And it revolutionized the film industry, because if you remember back in those days, if you see the old pictures, they had these they were black cameras that were called BNCs, which meant blimped noiseless camera. And you wonder what that means, because if the camera's noiseless, why did it need to be in a blimp, which is a housing that takes the sound off? Well, the reason was because most of the sound came right out the front of the camera. So you would hear it as the person was on the set. So the actor would be talking, you could hear this noise, so you had to actually take that sound out. So they made these giant cameras, and the cameras basically were lifted by two people. They weighed well over 100 pounds. I mean, and they were gigantic. And we started to realize that was the old Mitchell camera movement. And we started to make a movement that was smaller into a box that was about this big and was basically vulcanized rubber for inside of the camera to the outside, so it didn't cause sound. And they say, well, why? And the reason was because directors didn't want to shoot in the studios anymore. They wanted to go to places like New York, which was the biggest backdrop in the world, but the equipment was too big. So these cameras basically revolutionized the film industry. You could hand hold it. It could be in a studio mode. And it changed filmmaking in New York and probably all over the world, because instead of just having to be in a giant studio now, you could actually shoot in practical locations. Practical locations is where every director wanted to go, because you had a couple of streets in the studios in California. One was called New York Street, but they always looked alike because they only had a couple of blocks. So it changed the industry. And then what I did was I started working on the Panaglide. And the Panaglide basically was a stabilizing device that you wear on your body, similar to a Steadicam that you can buy now. And it was a 360 gimbal, so the camera always hang level. And we put a Panaflex camera on top of that, and it took off, because now you could go up staircases, run with people. In fact, one of the first movies I did was a movie that Paul Mazursky directed called An Unmarried Woman. And in the movie, Jill Clayburgh and her husband had split up, and they would jog, and they would interrupt each other in different places to meet. So Paul Mazursky said to me, I want to use this camera. I need to have you to do this, because you're going to jog and run right with these people. But what happened was, it was a prototype camera. I did not have one that was other than that. And I said, look, I don't know what's going to happen. And the first night I had video problems where I got back to my apartment. I said, I'm going to test this thing to make sure it's working, because 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm going to start shooting. And the whole picture was on an angle like this. So I tried everything, couldn't fix it. And I said, you know something, I'm just going to have to shoot it that way. And Paul Mazursky came to me and he said, you can compose the shot with the thing leaning like that? I said, oh, yeah, do it all the time. But that's what you do. You make do. But it changed the industry, because then once people saw that, everyone wanted to use it. And I made a deal, believe it or not, with Warner Communications, that for 5 years I wouldn't take any time off, and I would go from one job to the next job. And I worked 365 days a year in either traveling or shooting. The industry was great because it gave me an opportunity at a very young age to work with the greatest directors and have them explain to you what they wanted and why, which is the greatest education you can have. Working with John Huston and on Prizzi's Honor with Jack Nicholson, he would sit down and he'd tell you a story about the next scene, because he had emphysema. So he couldn't really breathe. We shot it in 8 weeks of 8-hour days. And he'd tell you a story about the scene and what it meant to him. And then you had to basically translate it into images and actually set those shots up and do it.
No, Craig, thank you. Amazing stories. I have a ton of questions for you for sure. Now let's move on to welcome Katya Orphali, partner at Chitui. Katya brings a unique blend of creative insight and business strategy to the team. with a background in business economics from the University of California and an MBA from UC Davis, focused on business strategy and product placement. Katya has carved her space in the entertainment world by bridging the gap between storytelling and finance. Katya has been instrumental in moving multiple TV and streaming projects from concept to ready for financing status. Alongside Cristina, she has worked closely with Richard and Craig for the past few years, helping G2E identify and develop the right projects and ensuring that both the creative vision and the business side align perfectly to secure financing and distribution opportunities. Katya, welcome so much to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. Will you tell us your story?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for having all of us here. I've been doing this with this wonderful group for the past few years. In the beginning, we started. I was a newbie in the business, so I just kind of started reading scripts. I did a lot of coverage. I got to see how content is relative to one another, either to current scripts we had or past movies that have been done, and kind of I just started understanding how comps work, and how to evaluate content based on the time we live in. Because now, as you know, trends used to kind of change maybe once every 5 years, viewing attitudes, content preferences once every 5 years, maybe once every 10 years. Now it's once every year, once every 6 months, depending on what we're looking at. So it's always exciting. It's always keeping us on our toes how the industry has been shifting based on what's going on in distribution, what's going on in content trends. And that's something that Cristina and I, we integrate heavily when we're evaluating new packages that come to us. We get an influx amount, whether from current clients or potential new clients, and we just kind of see where a package is at whatever stage it may be, how far it is in development, and we see this something we can work with, and our roles kind of change based on the stage of the project. So it could go from editing and making sure the pitch is sellable in the long run. It could go from helping directors or producers on that package create casting lists that make sense to the budget of the film, which Kyle and Richard do, where how much talent spent we have, if we could pre-sale it, since pre-sales is very integrated into the way we finance the film. So that's a lot of research and a lot of contemplation that kind of goes as we aid a package going closer to the green light. So there's a lot of different things that could come into like ad hoc analysis, right? So whatever Richard needs from us, we kind of adjust to what's being needed for information and needed for support. So it's always different, exciting every day. So that's about our role.
That sounds amazing. Thanks, Katya. Now, joining as well is Cristina Chereneta, highly experienced film, finance, and entertainment consultant, bringing over 20 years of expertise across film, television, music, sports, and entertainment marketing. Original from Brazil, Cristina has been based in the US since 1994 and has played a key role in bridging markets between Latin America and the global entertainment industry. Her deep experience in branding, product placement, and sponsorship integration has shaped projects across film, TV, and music videos, working with major players like CBS, 20th Century Fox, Paramount, Universal Pictures, and Warner Music Group. At G2E, Cristina applies her creative and strategic eye to carefully review, curate, and select projects for funding opportunities, ensuring that the right stories find their financial path. So, Cristina, welcome. Let us know about yourself then.
Thank you so much for having us here. I think Katya pretty much explained everything that we do on G2E, but it's extremely important that our role is to make sure we match the right project with the right producers, with the right directors, with the right cast. So we have like a very valuable package to put through development, also financing and distribution. So we outsource, every single project that come to us, and we try to make sure they are aligned with our business model, which, mainly is financial and also sales. I think on my background, through my entertainment, experience, I've been working with a lot of major, directors and producers, which taught me a lot about, be able to match who are the right director for the right project, the right producers, and the right talents as well. So yeah, I think that's, is a very exciting, project opportunity to work with, and bringing together the right people to the right project so we can put through financing.
No, great, Cristina. Obrigada.
De nada.
And last but certainly not least, we have Kyle Behling, an accomplished producer and proud member of the Directors Guild of America. Kyle is a graduate of California State University, Monterey Bay, where his passion for sports and storytelling first took root. After college, he moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in film, starting as an assistant to a well-established director and working his way up to assistant director and producer. His love for sports and film came together beautifully when he helped finance the acclaimed documentary Manny, which follows the life of boxing legend Manny Pacquiao. Throughout his career, Carl has traveled extensively, producing films, TV shows, documentaries, and commercials. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I started in humble beginnings as an intern many years ago and worked my way up through the DGA and the Producers Guild. And over the past few years, I've joined G2E as a budget creator, schedule breakdown. I read a lot of scripts that come through and try to sort through those projects and make them work financially and just try to make them as successful as possible, working with the team to try to help find talent, directors, producers to get these projects off the ground. I've learned a lot over the past couple of years in their business models and the way they work, and applied that to also my own personal projects that I get to work on throughout the past couple of years.
Wow, amazing team, you guys. Now, thank you all for sharing your incredible backgrounds. It's impressive, and to see so much experience that each of you bring to the table. Now, I find fascinated is how G2E combines both the creative and financial sides of the business, something that's been seen as separate roles as far as I can see in this industry, right? So I would start the conversation with what makes G2E's approach to film and TV financing unique, and how do you see your combined experience giving you that edge when evaluating projects?
I think I can answer that
Okay,
better.
go ahead.
Besides the obvious that we're smarter than most people. The reason I say that is because we have watched friends of ours bankrupt $27 million movies, ruin a very good production and finance company, file bankruptcy. I think what helped me is that I've been representing very famous people since I was in my 20s, including world champion boxers, incredibly famous musicians. And I tell this story, Don King, the boxing promoter, who was a legendary guy, just pulled me aside one day and said, never get enamored by the talent. And I didn't really understand what he meant at the time. He said that they're going to come and go. People like us, we're going to stay. And I never forgot that, because I see so many of my friends in Hollywood get caught up with creating film budgets that aren't viable, that I mean, all you have to do is like read Box Office Mojo and know a little bit of history about what works and what doesn't work. And they get caught up with, I have to work with Gaga, I have to work with this person. And they throw money out there that you'll never see back. And they make these mistakes. And a lot of them get caught up in, that's why I stayed based in New York. I've been going out doing business in Hollywood since 1988, probably a little bit earlier than that. And it was never my home base. It's so funny because my neighbor here is the president of the WGA, the Writers Guild East Writers Guild. So, she just moved here, and I didn't really said, "What do you do?" And she had the same position. She said, "I stay on the East Coast because you don't want to get caught up. People in Hollywood have too much hubris," she said. And I found that a way for me to, and I don't read scripts because I don't want to get attached. I want to make just sound business decisions. And I make business decisions based on the numbers. It all runs to the numbers for me. I have abilities to get data and analytics better than anybody, I think, because I get them from friends that come from the intelligence community that have more data on who is actually going to the theater. Now, I can talk to guys that come from high levels in the studios, and they tell me, well, I'm getting my information from these guys. And I'm like, they don't know. Variety magazine's not going to tell you how that works. And that's what so I found better ways and more efficient ways. And, I always looked out for the investor, because at the end of the day, without my institutional capital providers, and I worked with investment banks early on when I represented Michael Jackson. That's how I learned how to raise capital through Wall Street investment banks. And I think it just really kept me grounded in a way that I never really looked at it as, I'm going to make a movie with Jack Nicholson, or I'm going to make a movie with Sean Penn and Gary Oldman. And as I looked at what the best financial model was and how we were going to make our money back. The people that trust me with massive amount of capitals is where my loyalty lies. And the decision and the things that I don't understand about movies, that's why we have everybody on this call. And that's why we have our parent company, Bigger Group of Partners. My partner in London has been making movies since 1976. And he still works. I can call him at 5, 6 at night here, and I know it's 10, 11 at night there, and he's still up working. He has an incredible work ethic. He's a super smart guy. Through Craig, we have been talking to another gentleman who's a legendary Hollywood producer named Michael Tadros, who just came on as a full partner in our parent company, because after 63 of some of the biggest, most relevant movies in Hollywood in the last 30 years, from The Firm to Die Hard with a Vengeance, to I Am Legend, Hitch with Will Smith, Ocean's 8. His background, Craig. He's a legendary.
America, a list.
Right? The list goes on and on. The Firm with Tom Cruise, Cocktail with Tom Cruise, Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr., Indecent Proposal with Robert Redford and Demi Moore. And we started talking about finance models, and they had made a couple films and they couldn't sell them with some people. One of them used to be the president of Warner Brothers. And I never liked the way he approached things anyway. This guy, not Mike, this other guy, who will go nameless. And, the way we mitigate risk to investors, you're taking a 90% risk, which is what the indie film world is. That 9 out of 10 films use all their money because people call themselves producers and really aren't. And they call themselves directors and really aren't. And Marty Scorsese, I was having a conversation with him like 3 years ago, and he was screaming, everybody with a phone camera says they're a producer. And he said it's ruining the business. And we mitigate that 90% risk down to somewhere between 4 and 5%. So our investors know they're safe with us, and they know we're going to make good choices, because the board of directors of the parent company, which Craig is on, has more than 300 films under their belt as either producers, DPs and cinematographers, finance and sales companies. And we're built as a finance and sales company because it's all about generating revenue. And, production companies come to us all day long because they don't have money. They're off trying to raise money for one thing. So we line up in films and slates, and, we make really responsible decisions. And
nobody can get me to move if I'm not comfortable. I had people screaming at me and COVID, and why aren't we doing this? I'm like, there's no theaters. Why aren't we making movies? You can't make them. And they lost all their money. We were involved in a lot of movies with Johnny Depp and Forrest Whitaker, and a ton of movies came to us in COVID, and we just, and we had money even at the end of COVID, which when I first raised, and I just said no to everything. And I'll continue to do that because my investors trust me. And I've been incredibly lucky maybe, but every single film I've ever financed has made money except for one, but I got my investor out in a way that was incredibly unique and incredibly sophisticated. And that was a movie I did with Marty Scorsese. And it was just a tough film. The content was tough. It was really super long, but it had, great actors in it. But I just knew at that budget, it was impossible to make that box office. So my equity investor, who was at the bottom of the waterfall, became a senior lender next to the bank. And that's how we got her out fast. So that's how we do it. We raise money in $100 to $200 million tranches. We raised $100 million. We're out raising another $100 million, another $200 million right now. We're getting amazing responses from our hedge funds and investment banks. We're lining up our first set of meetings. We have big players in this business that love us, and we've created a finance model that is better than anybody's out there. It took us over a year to create it and fine tune it, and it's we have good proof of concept on it. So that's why should we have an investor pay back 22% on the debt when we can provide it ourselves for 12? So we just kind of did it in a way that we felt worked better than anybody, and it's a little bit of a disruptor in the industry. So we're looking forward to having the exponential growth again that models like this provide. We look for financially viable and sustainable business models. And that's what I create. I create business models and put teams of people together. Even Craig knows. Penny Marshall used to tell me all the time, how'd you get them to talk? I could never get them to talk. And I put these things, she'd go, how is this guy on the same movie as that person? Because they hate each other. I'm like, I worked it out. Don't worry about it. And that's another kind of thing I do well. I just put really great teams of people together. And Katya didn't know anything about the movie business 4 years ago, and now she holds her own with pretty much everybody. So the Katya and Christy work together constantly, and they really understand what we look for and what to look for, and then it comes to me, and then Craig shares it, Kyle and I share it, and then it'll move off to the board of directors. So we have a really sophisticated vetting process that works really well. And we can tell if people just don't have what the minimum criteria, and usually our consulting fees scare them off. But it also makes them, people think because they wrote a script, they're entitled to $10 million or $5 million or $20 million. And there's hundreds of thousands of scripts out there, and 10 movies will get made from that. And so, a lot of people aren't prepared. They just think that, they wrote a script and therefore they're entitled to money. I had a guy the other day who I met over LinkedIn. He'd send me one thing, and the next email from him, he sent me his bank account information and said, "This portfolio." I was like, "I don't even know who you are." He didn't even have a synopsis. It's just like, what planet are you on? Like, people just have no idea how challenging this is, and to get it right is very difficult to sustain successfully in the theaters. You just really have to know what you're doing. And that's why, we have this incredible group of people. So,
what makes a good script?
I can't answer that. So I think Kyle and Craig and
Craig also
answer that way better than I do. When they tell me the script is good, that's all
you believe it.
Yeah, that's really it, because I don't get in that lane. If I did, I always sound foolish when I do. So as I tell everyone, I only like to talk about things I know a lot about, because then people think I'm a little intelligent. So I like it. So, anyway, that's really all I have on that.
Mhm.
But they can answer the creative side fascinates me. I know I'm not good at it. But I think Kyle and Craig, I think Kyle's wants to say something here about this.
Where Richard doesn't read any scripts, I read hundreds of scripts a year, probably, and not all of them are good. A lot of them are not great, but I think what separates the good ones apart from the not so great, for me, it starts with a concept. Is the concept good? Is the idea good? Conflict, I think, is big. I think every scene and every story, every script has to have some sort of conflict. And then also characters and developing emotion. When I read a script to do a breakdown and a budget, like Richard said, I try not to get attached, but sometimes you can't help yourself. And I think going into the script and trying not to be attached, if you come away with some sort of attachment, then that would be the sign of a good story or a good script. Otherwise, sometimes a script can be okay, but they have one or two characters you kind of fall in love with, and you think, okay, there's something here, and you can go back to the writer and say, hey, I think you have a good idea, a good script. I think you just need help. I think you need to do another pass. You need to beef up certain characters or certain elements. But I think overall, a good idea, have an idea for a good script, and then conflict and work the story out is what sets the good ones apart from the not so great.
It's interesting that what he's saying is true. The problem with it is sometimes you can be wrong anyway. Really, what a good script is a script that has to hook somebody, whether it be an emotion, whether it be love, hate, something funny. But even then, you can be fooled. Years ago, I did a movie called Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman. And I remember reading the script and, it was funny. And then Sidney Pollack, the director, said to me, what do you think, Greg? And I said, who's going to laugh at a man in a dress? And it showed at the time, there were so many movies, television shows that had done that gig. And I thought, it's not going to work. Then you take one other element, a great actor. What Dustin Hoffman did with that was fantastic. I also did a movie called The Devil's Own, and I did both of them. I did The Devil's Advocate, and originally that was going to be Pacino. Then he kind of cooled on it, and then Dustin Hoffman was involved, and then as soon as Pacino saw that, he ended up doing it. And if you ever saw the movie, the last reel of the movie is so over the top. And again, I'm looking at it, and Taylor Hackford was the director, and he said, what do you think? And I said, I think the last whole scene is over the top. Pacino is the devil. He's trying to create the next Antichrist with Keanu Reeves and his daughter, and they don't know that. And there's a line where Keanu Reeves can't figure out who he is, and he says, who are you? And Pacino turns around and goes, they call me a lot of things. How about Dad? And he starts dancing to the song, It Happened in Monterey a Long Time Ago. And as he's walking around the room, I started to realize that it was so over the top. What a great actor did was he played it over the top. That's what made the scene work. So there's a lot of times that the printed word that you read when you read a script, you've got to really take it back. Because the first half an hour of a movie, basically you're developing the character so people care about them. Because if you don't care about the character, you don't care about the movie. So if you engage them and you hook them, then it's how far you take them on the ride. And then something like that at the end, it threw me. But that's what, as I say, is experience tells you. There's times where I'd look at something and say, this doesn't work. And then you watch there's a scene in Tootsie where Dustin Hoffman, we tried to make him look like a woman. And everything he did, we steam shaved him. He looked like a man in a dress. He didn't look like a woman. The idea was that he's supposed to be Dorothy and become this actress. And we tried everything. And finally, Sidney brought in a man named George Masters. That was Marilyn Monroe's makeup man, old timer. And he's watching the test that we shot. And all of a sudden he goes, don't you understand what the problem is here? And I'm like, no. He goes, it's his teeth. I said, what? He goes, women's teeth are longer and narrower. He goes, you've got And so in the movie, if you remember, he gets this appliance and he's living with Bill Murray and he puts this thing in, he goes, don't I look like what? And Bill Murray looks at him, he goes, you're really crazy, aren't you? And it's one of those things where these things evolve and you use them. That's what I did a movie with Robin Williams. If I told you how much he changed in the movie, you wouldn't believe it. It was a movie called Cadillac Man. Most of it was ad-lib by him. You had the basic concept, but when you cast somebody like that, you want him to take you on the ride, and that was the genius of Robin. So there is no, this is how you come out with a great script. Some of the scripts that are really good, they just don't work. But some that don't, you'd be surprised how they develop.
That I get. We see a lot of rewrites.
Yeah.
I see that. And Kyle and I go through this a lot. That's why we have to talk about it.
I like to add something to that. Sometimes when we get a script and I read the script and I see like, okay, this is very female-driven script. And, it gets me like to a point where, okay, who's going to be watching this movie? Just women. So I need to have a male perspective of the script. So, we can come and meet to the middle. So I always ask, Kyle or some of my male colleagues, please read the script because the way it's going to the female direction is not good enough for me. So I need to have, an overview from a male perspective to see where we can go to meet, in the middle. But, sometimes the script works it doesn't really work just because you like something about it. You have to have like a whole perspective from different, male and female. That's how I try to drive a little bit those projects to have both perspective on the story, not just female or just male. Otherwise, we don't sell too much.
Can I add one other thing? Sometimes, believe it or not, it's a shot, an image. If any of you remember Flashdance, when she pulls that thing and all the water hits her, it's an image that you never forget. And I remember I was doing with John Huston and Jack Nicholson, Prizzi's Honor, and it was one of the first days, and you're dealing with basically such a great director as John Huston, and they're at a funeral in a church for a police captain, and what's happened is you see all these blue coats, and the shot was a 3/4 shot from behind, and Jack is just sitting in the group with a dark suit, and I said, John, I can't even make him out. He goes, oh, don't worry. At a certain time, Jack will turn and he'll give you one of those looks. His face turns up and he sees Kathleen Turner. That's the first time he picks her out of the movie. And the look he gave, I mean, there could have been 50 people in the shot. That's the only face you saw. So that's the crafting of the movie means so much. It's not just always in the word, and you have to actually see these things and be able to sit down with the director and actually give him ideas or give her ideas. I worked at Penny Marshall many times, and a lot of times I'd say, this is it. She'd tell, just show it to me. I'll tell you if it's funny or not. That's what these people, they're geniuses a lot. It was just amazing. And the idea is you got to get on the wavelength.
When we worked on Hoffa, I remember just being on set and Jack had the script, but he wasn't following it. And he was telling the other actors, well, I would just keep saying this and they caught, and I would just keep doing this. And then I would do this. And all of that got in the movie because he just ad-libbed it. And he was just so brilliant at that. He would just keep moving with it. And the actors, you could see at the beginning, they would work, and then they started ad-libbing, and it came out fantastic. And that was a big part of his genius, too. He just had such a great command of his craft. He made a big part of his fortune because he took smaller upfront fees and larger back-end pieces. I mean, he's worth more than $400 million. And that's how he took risks, too. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I knew Ken Kesey, the wrestler, because who wrote it. I got introduced to Jack early on in my life, and Danny DeVito and a couple other people. And that's people that really made an impact on how I made business decisions. But also with Michael Jackson, I got to I always heard the creative side of him, whether it had to do with the music business or not. He had all these other great ideas, including high def TV before anybody even thought about it. So I would take a creative idea from him and put a budget to it and then bring it to my investment bank. And so I had a little bit of understanding of the creative side. But once I realized I could try to read, because I tried to read a script once and I didn't understand it. And then I just never tried again. And it just worked out better for me. Because if I got too attached to the subject matter, it would skew my ability to make good business decisions. That's what I've kind of prided myself on. Nothing can make me budge if it's not working inside of how we're structured. I don't go too far outside of the models we created, unless it's something really special, and then we take another one.
So when you are evaluating like a project, a movie, a TV series, you look to the script and what else? And what are like red flags that you might look at?
The ability for us, we carefully vet the producers and the directors. We need to know who they are, because most of these people, the chances of me giving the reins to somebody on a $15 million movie that's never done that are zero. And all these people tell us first they tell us we have all these actors attached, and none of them are actually attached. They're just some, their agent might have the script, and there's a big difference between that. And it's those guys like Mike who can call anybody, like we don't really deal with agents if we don't have to. And the agents that we do deal with and the agencies we deal with, we have fantastic relationships with, because they know that the money's there and they trust us. And so we can get a little bit more than most people to attach an actor that most people can't, just getting a window ahead of time, because they know that once we greenlight the film, the money's already there. We don't have to go look for the money. We don't ask them to lend us their name so we could get the money. I mean, I was successful with that early on, but that's because the actors we were working with owed favors to some people, or just loved the script so much. They were telling you, we're doing this movie. And those actors are far and few between that have that kind of power. But that my experience has been, if the actor doesn't love the script, you really, and people argue with me all the time about this, that they're just not going to give the performance that they give if they really heavily invested in it. And that's just been my experience. I have other people that tell me they're professionals, will be great. I'm like, I don't believe it.
It makes sense. What do you think? Like, what's the filmmakers that come to you? What are the biggest mistakes that they make that you try to avoid?
Right. So G2 is a subsidiary company of the parent company. The parent company doesn't advertise. Everybody in Hollywood knows who we are, but nobody on LinkedIn does. So the LinkedIn, the website that we have is to give new people opportunities, because people gave me opportunities. And plus I saw films come in with Penny for Cinderella Man, and other people that were brand new writers that had unbelievable scripts. So I know they're out there. But anyway, that's all I have to add.
Okay, somebody else wants to have it about what is your approach to work? Maybe Katya and Cristina, because if I understand it correctly, you are the two who do the first review of the package you receive, correctly?
Yes, we basically, we outsource the projects, and through the website, we are able to review the new projects that are coming to us. So obviously we have requirements in order to, see if the project aligns with a business model, or to even consider to put through financing. Every single package that comes to us, we make sure we have all the elements we need. The script, the pitch deck, the budget breakdown. And it's extremely important that the budget breakdown be completely line-up items, so that way we know how much it's going to cost the project. And the talent has to be attached. That way we know for sure that project is more advanced than, the most of it. But sometimes the talent they actually have chose to attach to the project doesn't have, a sales value. for the project, for our business model. That might need to be changed. And the same thing goes for the director, for the producer, and all of them need to be vetted by us in order to make sure we have like a very solid package in order to have a financial successful project. So my job and Katya's job is to review every single package to make sure they are aligned with our business model. If they are not, then we can help them out, consult for them, basically teach them how to get the package ready to the point where it's a strong package to show to financing, to put to financing. And I think that's pretty much, what we do. We help, bring the right talents if they don't have. We help to bring the right director, the right producer if they don't have. So we try to make sure the package is strong enough to finance the project. You want to add something, Katya?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback off what you were saying. Sometimes we have scripts that we call naked when they kind of don't have producers or directors or really anyone else on board. But sometimes we take them as clients because we really like the content, we really like the script. And whenever we have cases like that where we kind of start from ground zero, something that we found really positive is sometimes we go first for the director. Or sometimes with a producer, but usually a director, because if a director has a good vision of the script and they like it for whatever reason, that's going to instantly attract, talent, because actors usually like working with particular directors who they're, familiar with their work. They have a vision of what they do. They want that experience, something they could translate a little bit easier into the value proposition that a project brings. So again, even if let's say an actor somehow gets a script in front of them and they really like it, if it doesn't have all those other elements like the team behind it, the strategy of where it's gonna be shot, if it's gonna make sense with their schedule, it's gonna make sense with their budget, if they trust in the people behind it, then they themselves or their agents, whoever their managers are not gonna recommend them attaching themselves to the project. So a lot of those things that have to be considered before something gets greenlit, it's are things that Christy and I really consider and we kind of vet through with our consulting company and with the board, before we kind of push, producers or their packages to kind of make next steps. So let's say, for example, a client, like a producer client, wants to go out and make offers to talent. We usually have them kind of talk with us and, share, talent lists and hit lists that we approve that makes sense with us and our sales agent, and they like it as well, and their director likes it. So everyone's on the same page. Communication's key. And, we're not going to make mistakes and make our client look bad or make, ourselves look bad. So everything's about due diligence and just making sure everyone's on the same page. That's what creates the best deliverables, best responses, and everyone is happy and, goes able to sleep at night. So
because I can imagine that they can come to you like with they have an actor, an A-list actor, but that means nothing. Am I right? I mean, I don't know nothing about the movie industry, but I can imagine that doesn't mean nothing. There's so much more.
Yeah, it takes a lot of elements in order for you to complete a project to the point that we see a lot of value to, to consider financing. And, sometimes if you have like a project, a script, and they have like a big name attached to it, that doesn't mean they are actually really attached to the project. That means like it's their wish list. Oh, I wish I have, a Brad Pitt attached to the project. But sometimes Brad Pitt is not going to be the actor for that project because of the budget of the project. If it's a $10 million budget, we cannot attach Brad Pitt to the project because his budget alone is probably, twice as much as that. So we need to work with talents that, will bring value to the project and it will be a perfect fit for that kind of budget that we are discussing to produce the project with. So, it takes a lot of elements in order to attach and also to, to be able to make the project move forward. We cannot just, say yes to everybody because obviously, we we try to produce something, to finance something that makes sense to our business model.
Now, Craig, I would like to hear a little bit more about you, because you have this amazing background, and I imagine all the people you met, all the experiences you had in the past, I'm thinking they shaped who you are today, right? So tell us a little bit about it.
I'm going to tail back to what we were just talking about and give you an idea. All of these people are professionals. And even with all of this thinking and preparation, you think, okay, surefire, you can't miss. But then the other thing comes, like I did a movie called League of Their Own with Penny Marshall. And that movie spent $10 million with another director. And the studio looked at it and said, horrible. So then Penny got it in turnaround. 2 more scripts were written. So now you've got all these people doing budgets, wardrobe, all this work has been done. And now you've got 3 different scripts that that are vying. Then Penny came in and said, it's got to be funny. And she hired Babalu Mandel and Lowell Gans, great comedy writers, used to Laverne and Shirley and shows like that. Now you've got another script, and that gets approved. Meanwhile, all of these people are still working, trying to juggle these budgets, figure out exactly what's going to happen. And then what most people don't know is we shot that whole movie. It took 11 months. After the 11 months, they hired 4 editors in different cities to cut it. So they cut 4 different versions of it. And then, what was Bruce's name? Anyway, they brought it all to one editor then. And from those 4, he cut it. When he cut it, it was over 3 hours long. So then he had Bruce Bowers was his name, and he had to cut it all down to an amount of time that people could sit. So even with all the preparation, and you can see how much goes into all of this, there's no surefire way of doing it. At one point, Universal was casting according to a computer. They thought, oh, this is the way to do it. We'll figure out who's strong in the South and who's strong in the inner city, and we'll cast that way. That didn't work. There's a chemistry that has to work, and there has to be one person. The most important thing that I learned very early on was a director's job, even if the person didn't know how to set up a scene or set up a shot, furnish a point of view. Because if you don't have a point of view of what this movie is going to be, the story that you're going to tell, you haven't done your job. But if you can furnish that point of view, you can get people around you who know how to do their jobs. And what you do is you give them the leeway to be able to say, well, this could be done if you do that. But if you don't start with that concept and know where you're aimed, it's a disaster. But, and again, I've worked on, between television shows and movies, 85 major motion pictures and television shows. And I've seen people fail. I've seen people, figure it out. But the most important thing is, again, what I just said, furnish a point of view. If you've done that and the story appeals to people, you've got a good chance.
G2E, it started with Craig and Richard, right? Both of you started the company. How did you guys come together? You know each other for?
No, we started talking over a year ago. I mean, it was, it takes time. I mean, it's one of those things that it builds, and you start finding you have the same ideas about things, and the interests are the same, and the taste is the same, and it starts to mesh. Because if you're in different directions, very difficult to do that. And the other thing I'll tell you also too is in casting, there's a lot of times I started a movie called The Devil's Own. Also, I did 2 devil movies in 1 year, and Brad Pitt is in it, and Harrison Ford. And the studio head came to me and he goes, "What do you think of the script?" And I said, "You got a script?" I said, "I've got 26 pages." He goes, "Oh, no." He goes, "What happened is the only time that we could get them both together. So we're just going to start the movie." That's like starting to build a house without a blueprint. I mean, how do you build a building when you don't even know what your foundation is going to be? So he said, "Oh, we're hiring this guy. He'll go nameless. Who's a great script doctor." And he said he'll finish the script in 2 weeks. Well, this guy would come out on the set and he'd write a scene. He'd give one to Alan Pakula, the director, one to Harrison, and one to Brad. They'd go in their campers. We'd sit around and eat. The whole day would go by. And then they'd come back out and they'd say, "Well, if you say this, I wouldn't say that. And I wouldn't." But anyway, so you can imagine how disrupting that is. I mean, and Harrison Ford said to me, for my character, he's the same person all the way through. Brad's character changes because you don't know if the audience is going to hate him or the audience is going to like him, and how does he gauge that performance? So those kind of things are, they throw you a curve like that, and that's where everyone has to kind of pick up and try to contribute and get that done.
So I ran into Craig circuitously through somebody else, but I had known him before. I just did not well, and then he kind of got involved on a TV show with us, and this guy kept going back and forth, and nothing happened. And I started telling him what we were doing, and the way I got back into it, I was just I was in the middle of this custody fight, and I was going to just retire and play with my kid, and so many people kept calling me. We can't get our films financed, and you got to help me. And I was like, and I was just in a position in life where I needed something positive to do because the negativity surrounding what I was dealing with my daughter and the mother of her child. And I was like, you know what? Let me go give it another run. And here we are. And I was able to be real successful in raising a lot of money. And we've just, we create business models and grow companies. I've been on the board of a couple public companies. So I know, we have our Securities and Exchange Commission attorneys in place. And so we know how to grow companies and exit them out or piece them off. My big company back in the day, we pieced off to Viacom on a nice sale. And so I've been successful on the business side of creating companies that are viable and sustainable and can grow exponentially. And that's what our plan is here. If we just finished our white paper for our new institutional capital providers and investors. And, I had a call yesterday with one of them, and he was like, this is amazing. He was very focused on our growth and how our growth looked. And, I have all the answers for that. These things grow exponentially because he said, well, what's next after I get if I put 200 million in, what's next? And I said, 18 months, 12 months later, we need 300 million more. And then we need another 500 million in 2 years after that. And that's the way these companies, historically, they can grow like that. You just have to be careful because there's a whole littered highway of people that have tried this and made all the mistakes, and they're there, and you just don't do that. And a lot of it is getting caught up in, I have to do the Ghostbusters, my friend, the Ron Media filed bankruptcy. They made two disastrous mistakes at the end, Gucci with Gaga and Ghostbusters Afterlife. And if you just looked at those, you would see these movies are going to lose all their money. And somehow this guy, I have to do it. I have a slate deal with Warner. You don't want studios as your partner. They're going to push you around. We only take studio partners when they don't push us around, and we make that clear what their role is. And we've done that before. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to get in that position. And every time somebody does, it ends in disaster. And he was trying to tell me it was COVID. I'm like, this was after COVID. It wasn't COVID. It was those two things. And you did everything wrong then. And there was some issues with who he got financing with because they were under investigation. And it's just, how do you think a movie about the Gucci family with Lady Gaga is going to make $400 million at the box office? Because that's what it needed to make its money back. And you could just look at that and go, no way. It's not hard. It's not, the writing's all over the wall, so.
I was thinking about going back a little bit in your history that you were working with Michael Jackson and Don King. That have been amazing experiences in your life. I guess that shaped who you are also. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I was the way I got involved with Michael, I was in the television business. And in 1987, all of the television networks around the world that were government owned, because that's all they were, became privatized. And I was working with Don King and selling all the big fights and WWF wrestling overseas. And I had made a deal with Bill Graham, a legendary concert promoter from San Francisco. I was up in his office one day, and we're up on the third floor, and I look in the corner, and I'm like, what's all that? And he goes, oh, we filmed all our concerts for 20 years. And it was everyone from The Who with Keith Moon to the first U2 tour to the Rolling Stones, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Ann Young, Janis Joplin. I mean, it was 2,000 hours of the greatest rock and roll concerts ever. And he goes, oh, that's not worth anything. And I was like, listen. So it was all on film. And all the posters were there in a big pile, just in like this empty room in the corner of the building. And it was they had just thrown it there because they didn't think it had any value. And it really didn't, because there wasn't much place to put it. But then all these networks needed content. So they spent several $1 million and converted it all from film to beta SP tape, which is television quality. And then it was PAL A and PAL B and PAL C in Europe. And we converted it all. And my first deal with Polygram Video was for, I think for 10 videos was like $5 million or something. It was an enormous amount of money for that. And I sold it all over the world. And Michael Jackson had heard about what I was doing, and he called me up and he said, can you do that for me? And he was going out on the Dangerous tour. And that's how we did Michael Jackson live in Bucharest. And right around that same time, my partners, John Luby and Scooter Weintraub, I met Scooter on the Dangerous tour. He was doing the tour sponsors. John Luby had come from Pace Communications, Pace Concerts with Lou Messina as Taylor Swift's promoter. And he was at Avalon Attractions, which is a huge concert promoter. So I was already doing the TV for a lot of those big human rights concerts with Bono and Sting and Springsteen and The Edge and Peter Gabriel and Tracy Chapman. And we'd done, so we had the Freddie Mercury AIDS benefit. And so I had a history of being able to deliver that. We pulled it off in Romania, like a couple of years after they had hung Ceausescu and his wife in the town square. And once the Iron Curtain lifted there, and Michael was always so great with children, we had gotten a tour of some of the orphanages when we were over in Romania. And one person pulled us aside and said, listen, the government cannot take care of these kids. So even kids with mild Down syndrome or mildly retarded, the government was euthanizing them by the tens of thousands. And Michael heard about that, and we ended up getting like 1,000 kids adopted here that nobody knew about. We didn't really talk about it. And because of that, Michael and I just became really good friends. And then he started counting on me for more and more because I wasn't a yes man for him. And like everybody else. And he was having a lot of problems with the Beatles catalog with Sony because he thought that they were not paying him what he was supposed to get paid. And they weren't. So, I'm kind of like a pit bull. So I went in and cleaned house and got him like $18 million back. And we took more control over, what was going on and more transparent reporting on the royalties. And we just became really good friends. And I always tell this story. He was one of the most, probably, one of the 10 most famous people on the planet. He would call me like 20 times a day sometimes. I'm like, this guy's lonely, man. It was really, like Michael Jackson on the line too. I'm like, bro, I just talked to you. But he was fantastic. And I know he was a good father, and I was around all those issues where with the kids, and I never saw any of that, because if I did, I would have taken him aside and given him a beating. And he just never, he was just such a great guy and such a great husband and such a creative genius. And that's kind of how I got in his orbit. And then he would there would be nothing to do. And then out of the blue, I'd get a phone call and he'd go get everybody together, and I'd get my whole creative team and everybody together, and he'd come up with this brilliant idea, and we'd put pen to paper, and we'd go to the record label or whoever to Prince. I was doing a lot of work with Prince Bandar because they were friends, and he was in Washington, D.C. a lot, and got a lot of money from the Saudis with him, and worked with Kathleen Kennedy and Casey Silver, who did Jurassic Park, and Casey was I think he was the CEO of MGM, Craig, or something.
I think so. I don't remember exactly.
So and that's how that right after that, I got in the movie financing films, and I had some success really early on. And I thought I knew what I was doing, and it wasn't as easy. And so it was a real pleasure to work with Michael. But he taught me a lot about getting capital. I was able to work with investment banks, and that's how I learned how to raise capital institutionally, because we had relationships with Lehman Brothers. And any idea Michael had, because he always needed money. Anything that he would call me about cost, tens of millions to whatever. And then he started having to borrow against the Beatles catalog. The last album was 4 years late, $30 million over budget. We did the concerts at the Garden, the 30th anniversary, the 3 days and 1 day before 9/11. So we were all in New York on 9/11. Still have the email from that. Yeah, we were supposed to be in One World Trade on the 81st floor at 9 a.m. on 9 with our banker at Lehman. I still have the email. We were basically heading down. We're like, let's just do it the next day. And we were supposed to be up there. We were in the Palace Hotel on the 51st floor when it happened. So we saw everything. It was, I lost a lot of friends that day. But Michael was a fascinating guy. And then the hangers on and the bodyguard, the really loyal bodyguard got fired, Henry Aubrey. He was a Riverside County sheriff, and too many of the bad people were around. And in 2004, I walked away and I said, this guy's going to die soon. 5 years later, I get a phone call. And so the Godfather and my daughter, who's Magic Johnson's agent, they were in the front row of the funeral. Really, really sad stuff. But Darren Prince and I talk about that all the time. He tells my daughters, Michael Jackson used to call your dad all the time. And it was really great to be around him. He was truly a creative genius. And I never had seen one. I'd heard about them until I met him. I never saw them. So I had a really great experience with Michael. And I was thinking about him the other day and realized it's been 16 years since he passed away.
Yeah, time flies.
Seems like yesterday. Yeah. I got the call, because I remember exactly where I was when I got the call. So anyway, I had a good run with him. He was one of the people that would always made me laugh. Because he was the one I always just remember that. Like, this guy calls me all the time. He's so famous. And I'm like, he's so lonely. But he used to love Burger King and, but he never had a childhood. And that's the reason with the kids. He just was a big kid. He was
a big child. Yeah.
He never got a chance to be a kid. He was famous at 5. He was world famous at 5. 5. And the things he saw on the road, too, were things that children shouldn't see. So that was a big thing. But he was funny. He would pretend to be the butler, like when I'd call Neverland before cell phones. He'd pretend to be the butler. I'm like, Michael. She's like, it's not Michael, it's the butler. Like, Michael, it's not butler. It's like, it's Coppola. He was a really good dad. I also remember one day we were doing the last album. And I wasn't down there. I was going to come down. They were in Turnberry Island. And I didn't know the littlest kid, but Paris and friends I knew. And the man had come in with room service, and the kids didn't say thank you. And he said, hang on one sec. And they put the phone down. He goes, you make sure you tell this nice man, thank you very much for bringing her dinner. And that was the kind of guy, that's really who he was. He was that kind of guy. That's the gentle soul that I knew. And he was a good father. Anything else I never witnessed. I was around him enough to have. I don't believe any of that. I believe that was a real money.
Mm-hmm.
And they almost ruined his life. And that took a lot out of him. And I was sad. But anyway.
No, thanks for that, Richard.
We have great stories.
We could stay here all day talking.
Yeah. Really. I was just thinking of something the other day. I make myself laugh a lot. I was like, I remember.
Maria, Richard alone is another podcast for you.
For sure.
Already another podcast. You have so many stories from my experience to share that amazing.
For sure, Richard.
Yeah.
Richard, I'm also thinking, you're an athlete, you are a boxer. That's how you started.
I was a wrestler and then a kickboxer. Right. I was a world contender. I was an all-American wrestler and a world contender kickboxer. And then I started managing fighters. And that's how I got involved with Don King in the boxing business. And I managed a bunch of kickboxers. And we made the movie. My fighter was the co-star of the movie Kickboxer, was Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's was my first kind. That was like in the late 80s. And so I was on a movie set. And then 2 years later, we were doing Huston. The State of Grace, kind of almost at the same time.
Now, I would like now to go back to Craig. Craig, I also would like to hear a little bit more from you. You made, I'm seeing here my notes, 75 major films, right? Amazing directors. How did it work? They have to tell you their vision and then you have to put it into the camera, right? How that works?
It's different on different movies. Some again, as I was saying about John Huston, and Francis is the same way. They were great storytellers, and Francis still is. And what he wants you to do is to think like him. So he'll tell you a story about the scene before you ever shoot it. You've read it, but the thing is, it's what he's looking to feel like. One of the things he realized when he was making the first Godfather is he wanted to have that feeling of the family. And that comes through in the movie. If you look at Godfather 1, it's about the family. It's, there's Clemenza and all the people that are around it, but it's really the family. And that was what he was trying to get across in Godfather 3. He said, but there aren't as many opportunities because it's 20 years later. And really what's happening now is Michael is basically the head of the family. And he said, it's hard to actually, Sonny's dead. A lot of characters are gone. And he tried to, that's the only true story, believe it or not. That Pope did die, if you remember. And if I don't know if you go back that far, but at that point, the Vatican Bank was something like $600 million short. And there was all kinds of controversy. And the new Pope was picked, and then the new Pope died. It's pretty weird. And no one ever really knew. They didn't tell you why or anything else. And then there was no talk about the money that was missing from the Vatican Bank. And everything had modernized. If you remember, it wasn't like the old characters from the original Godfather. It was more like the two twins that were the bodyguards in good suits and everything. Something was totally different. And the reason was because Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 were going to be consecutive. Those movies were written exactly at the same time. And what happened is Francis went to Robert Evans at Paramount and he said, it's like they wanted at that time to have Anthony Quinn to be Vito Corleone. And Francis said, I'd love to go to Marlon Brando to see if I can get him to do the role. So Robert Evans said, go ahead. So Brando read 1 and 2. It was consecutive. And when Francis came to see him, he said, I'll do this movie under one condition. If you look at the movie 1 and 2, he said, if you take the center of this out, I'll do the movie and I'll win an Academy Award. Now, what that did to Godfather 2 is, if you remember, the movie takes place before and after Godfather 1. And that's what caused that to happen. And he said, if the studio goes for it, come back and I'll tell you my other stipulation. So Robert Evans says, well, yeah, we could do that. But what's the other stipulation? He said, I got to go back and ask him. So Francis said to me, he goes, I had to go back. And he says, what was the other stipulation? He says, I get $10 million. Back in those days, no one got $10 million. But that's what ended up happening. And then you can go online and actually see these screen tests. They tried everybody for Michael Corleone's role, even James Caan, Robert De Niro. You'll see all the screen tests. The studio wanted Ryan O'Neal to play that role. And Francis said, no, I have this guy. He was an unknown at the time. He said, Al Pacino, I'd like to use him. So make a long story short, they eventually cast Michael as Pacino as Michael. And they started shooting in Italy, and it was the wedding scene of him and Apollonia. And so the first day of shooting, Francis tells the story, he said, in the first scene, Al, he goes, what's going to happen is you're going to speak to these old Italian ladies, and you're going to be giving them cookies. And he says, Francis, I don't speak Italian. He goes, that's okay. You'll move your mouth. It'll be a montage. And he goes, and then you're going to get up and you're going to waltz. He says, Francis, I don't waltz. He says, no, that's all right. You'll turn and there'll be music. And then you get in a car and you drive off. He goes, I don't drive. And he thought, what have I done to myself? I fought for this guy. He can't do it. That's exactly how the movie started. In fact, we were at Al's 50th birthday party in Palermo, and he was telling me the story. And the two of them, I mean, after a couple of bottles of wine, they were laughing, and the reason they started in Italy, because Francis said, I thought by the time they saw the dailies in California, they'll think, oh, he's really good, and they won't stop us and fire us. That's how that whole thing started. But the stories are amazing. I mean, what really went on, the film industry was totally different in that time. And now it's a lot of people making a lot of mistakes. I hate to say it. The network, the studios are losing lots of money because
they're making bad decisions, man. Getting killed. And these retreads of these of superhero films are getting old. People are pushing back. The whole woke era, thank God, is over. You know, I'm a civil rights activist, so I get it. But the transgender roles in the films where no one's taken into consideration the Bible Belt. It pushes back. I mean, you have to make movies that people could want to watch, and I think our country kind of went too far on a lot of that. So I'm not a political guy. I work with a lot of guys in the military and the intelligence community on my human rights missions, and I've spoken out against things Obama did with SEAL Team 6 on the Bin Laden thing. We did a video about it. I financed it. It's very successful, and I just these decisions that these studio execs are making are horrendously bad, and you've got kids that really just have that's who's running things, and they just
Richard, can I say something that goes along with that? I was with Francis a few years ago having a conversation. I said, how are you doing? And this is a man that made some classic movies. And he said, I'm depressed. I said, why? And he said, because you're not going to see any classic movies made anymore. The studios will do scary movie 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 just to make money. He goes, and you're not going to see these classic movies. And he goes, if you take it one step further, 100 years from now, as a time capsule, people will want to look at these films and say, I wonder what people were like back then. And what they're going to do is watch these crummier movies. And and they're going to say, well, these people idiots, this is the kind of stuff they watch. And I never thought of it, but it's true.
I was going to ask about that. What are the trends you guys see?
I think the movie business is going to flourish again. I think we're going to see a whole new renaissance. We're going to see great stories again, and great storytelling, and investors are going to have confidence in investing in the movie business now. And we're not going to have, all of those animated studios just went bankrupt and shut down. Some of the Technicolor, I mean, all like 4,500 people out of it. Well, they didn't have people that understood animation. They had people that were all they did was acquire other companies and service so much debt that it was inevitable that they were going to fail. And they all did. And they're all gone, and they'll never return. They won't even restructure out of bankruptcy. And these are mistakes. These are just basic business mistakes that, you don't take a CEO from the muffler shop and put him in running an animated studio. I don't see that as a smart idea. You want people that understand this business that are running, big companies like that. And I have experience in running a mid-sized company, 200 employees. I understand how that works. So anyway, I mean, I have my own opinion. I don't know what it is, but we focus on films that are we feel that are profitable and can reach a wide audience, and that's the real criteria. We'll take on anything, but there's certain things that, especially now with a child. My kid needs to be proud of me of the movies I make.
I wanted to make a question just to Kyle to bring him a little bit back to the conversation. Kyle, I was just thinking, you are a producer, and I just imagine if you could like produce anything, no restrictions. What did you create?
I mean, I'm a big sports fan. I love sports movies. Yeah. Big fan of League of Their Own. Great movie. I actually just recently showed it to my wife, who's never seen it, and she fell in love with it. And she's she's not a big sports fan, but she loves, she's come to appreciate baseball. I think if I could do a baseball movie,
that one.
yeah, that would be my dream. Also, before I became a filmmaker, I was actually a marine biologist, and I only had 4 years of baseball eligibility, but being a marine biologist would have been at least 8 to 15 years of school. So I switched over, walked across the street to the film department. But making a movie about sharks, I think, would also be on my bucket list of making a film or producing a film.
Before we finish, I would like to thank you all, of course, and for everyone listening, whether they're a filmmaker or have any kind of project, or if they are an investor interested in what you do, what's the best way them to connect with you?
Yeah, I think we don't really. We haven't solicited work in so long. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find our website out there. And you can, we don't have a number. You can, my number and email are on my LinkedIn profile. I think everybody else's. The parent company doesn't advertise because the phone would never stop ringing. But most people know how to find me. We have our own group of investors. We're bringing in some other advisors right now that we think we're going to be good, but it's not hard to find me. I'm in the book, as they say. But yeah, we really appreciate your time here.
No, I thank you all for this. An amazing conversation.
We're going to start working on your husband's animated movie with Keys and everybody soon. So we're really super excited about that with Sean Derrick, and we can start to give Mikos a little publicity here. We have a great animated film that we're going to be creating the package for and supporting the theme parks. And Sean Derrick is a very prolific writer. She comes from a Hollywood family. Her dad was a legendary director, and she had stepmothers that were Linda Evans and Ursula Andress and Bo Derek, and she's a fantastic writer, and she's got some fantastic ideas. And we look forward to working with the team at Mikos and helping them realize their vision too. They have a fantastic business model, and we're super excited about that. So I gave a plug to RJ.
Thank you. No, thank you, Richard. Thank you for being here. Craig, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Same here.
Thank you, Kyle, Cristina. Thank you all. And it's an amazing conversation. Now, I'm Maria Mollen. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.